The HOA built 23 luxury cabins on my private island. When I told their president to stop, she smirked and handed me a trespassing notice. Then she ordered her crew to bulldoze the dock my late wife and I built with our own hands, splintering. 60 years of memories in seconds. That's when I stopped arguing and started planning. They thought they had me trapped because my deed had conveniently gone missing. What they didn't realize was that while they built cabins, I was building a case, one that would turn their $1 million project into my retirement plan. So, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, because you'll want to see the look on their faces when I finally pull out the paper that ends their little empire. And if you believe no HOA bully should ever steal a family's legacy, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because this story from Tomato Tales is just getting started. That morning felt ordinary, quiet lake, soft fog, a steaming mug of black coffee in my hand. After 35 years as an Army engineer, peace was the only thing I ever wanted. My father had bought this island back in 1954. 7 acres of rock and pine he called his splinter of heaven. He passed it to me, and I treated it like sacred ground. My wife Helen and I built the dock ourselves after my last deployment. Every plank was a memory, every nail a promise. Then came that sound, a low metallic growl rolling across the water. Not a fishing boat, not a motor. It was heavy machinery. Bulldozers, diesel engines grinding as they clawed over the causeway that links the mainland to my island. At first I told myself it had to be a mistake, maybe a lost contractor. But when the first truck rumbled onto the shore, its door stamped with Maple Shores Community Association, my gut tightened. This was no accident. It was an invasion. I crossed the lake to confront them, thinking I could talk sense into whoever was in charge. Instead, I met a woman whose smile was sharper than steel, and a clipboard that could ruin lives. You'll want to hear what came next. Stay tuned only on Tomato Tales, and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the moment their empire begins to crumble. When I crossed that lake, I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was just confused. You see, I'd spent decades as an engineer in the Army. I'd seen enough chaos to know that most problems start from bad communication, so I figured maybe it was a mix-up. A contractor who read a map wrong, a surveyor who typed the wrong coordinates. But when my boots hit the gravel on my island, I knew this wasn't confusion. It was invasion. She was standing there waiting for me, the kind of woman who could ruin your day without raising her voice. Mid-50s, expensive haircut, and a face that said, "I'm used to winning." Khaki pants, polished shoes, and a clipboard tucked under her arm like a weapon. "Can I help you?" she asked. Not like someone offering help, but like someone daring you to give her a reason to call security. I introduced myself calmly. "Name's Jack Rains. This island belongs to me. I think your crew made a mistake." She glanced down at her clipboard, pretending to check something, then looked back up, that little smile spreading across her face like poison. "No mistake, Mr. Rains," she said smoothly. "According to our updated community plat, this island is part of the Maple Shores expansion. Phase 3 construction started this morning." For a second, I actually laughed. It sounded ridiculous. "Ma'am, this land's been in my family for 70 years. It's private property. I can show you the deed." Her eyes narrowed. She tapped her clipboard with one perfectly manicured finger. "If you can find that deed, feel free to bring it by. Till then, this is designated community property, and you're interfering with authorized work." Authorized work. Those words hit harder than any insult. Then, as if to prove her point, she turned away from me and called to one of her workers, a guy in a bulldozer who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Clear the shoreline," she ordered. "All of it." He hesitated, his hands frozen on the controls. I took one step forward. "Don't you dare," I said. But Karen, yeah, that was her name, didn't even look at me. She gave a single nod. The bulldozer roared to life, its blade lowering like a guillotine. And in a few horrifying seconds, the dock Helen and I built together, the place where we used to drink coffee and watch the sunrise, shattered into a heap of broken boards floating on the water. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I just stood there and watched every memory I had of that dock go under. Then I turned, climbed back into my old John boat, and headed home. Because I wasn't beaten, I was planning. That night I tore through every drawer, every cabinet, hunting for that missing deed. But what I found instead was something even bigger. You won't believe what they tried next. Stick around only on Tomato Tales and hit that subscribe button right now, because this war was just getting started. That night I didn't sleep. I just sat at my desk staring at the wall, my coffee long gone cold. The sound of that bulldozer kept echoing in my head, the crack of splintering wood, the hiss of the lake swallowing what was left of my dock. Helen would have told me to take a breath, to calm down before doing something stupid. But Helen wasn't here anymore, and the people who destroyed her dock were sleeping peacefully in their newly claimed community expansion. So I did the only thing that made sense. I went hunting for the deed. I tore through every file cabinet, drawer, and folder in my home office. Helen had always been meticulous about keeping records. Everything was labeled by date and category. But when I reached for the folder marked Island Deed, the space was empty. Just air. I froze. My hands started to shake. That deed had been there for decades. It was proof, our proof, that the land belonged to us. Without it, my words meant nothing. For hours, I tore the place apart. The attic, the basement, even the old safe we'd barely touched in years. I found tax bills, insurance papers, even my father's original survey map from the 1950s. But not the one document that mattered most. By midnight, my house looked like a hurricane had hit it. And then, as if fate wanted to rub it in, I heard the faint hum of construction again. Even at night they were working, building on my land. I walked outside and stood by the lake, staring across the water. The floodlights from the island glared like spotlights cutting through the mist. I could see silhouettes of workers moving, the rhythmic flash of welders, the clatter of hammers. They were moving fast, too fast. It was like they wanted to finish before anyone could stop them. And then, 3 days later, I got the letter. Certified mail. The Maple Shores Community Association. Inside was an encroachment notice, a $250 fine for obstructing community property with unapproved personal items. Personal items, meaning my 2 chairs and a fire pit by the shore. They were building on my land and sending me the bill. That's when the anger came. Not the loud kind, the cold, steady kind that doesn't fade. They thought they could bury me in paperwork, but they forgot one thing. I was the guy who used to build bridges under fire, and I was about to start building one more, straight over their lies. The next morning, I decided to face them again. But this time, I wasn't coming with words. I was coming with proof. What I found next nearly broke me, but it also gave me my first clue. Don't miss and hit that subscribe button so you're here when I uncover the secret they thought they buried forever. By the next morning, the anger had settled into something sharper, focus. I wasn't just some bitter old man anymore. I was an engineer with a mission. My first call was to the county office. They brushed me off, said the updated community plat showed the island as part of Maple Shores. When I asked to see the file, they told me I could file a formal request and wait 6 weeks. 6 weeks? While the HOA turned my island into a rental resort. So I decided to do it the old-fashioned way. Dig through my own past. I spent hours in my workshop that afternoon, opening boxes I hadn't touched in decades. Old blueprints, photographs, Helen's gardening notes, even her recipe cards. And then, at the very bottom of a cedar chest, I found something rolled up and tied with a brittle piece of twine. It was a survey map. hand-drawn in black ink, dated 1956. The year after my father bought the island. I unrolled it carefully on the workbench. Every line, every measurement looked familiar. I'd walked those boundaries with him when I was a boy. And there it was, a bold outline labeled Property of Rains Family. My family. For a second I thought I'd won. Then my eyes caught the bottom corner. The box where the county surveyor's signature and seal should have been was blank. My heart sank. It wasn't the official copy, just a draft. A beautiful, useless piece of paper. That night, as the machines kept rumbling across the lake, I sat on my porch with the map spread across my lap. The moonlight hit the ink like silver scars. It wasn't enough to fight them, but it was proof that the truth still existed. Helen used to say, "Jack, even the smallest clue can lead to something bigger." And she was right, because while that map couldn't save me in court, it gave me a direction. If there had been a surveyor once, there had to be records. Someone, somewhere, had the coordinates burned into an old logbook, and I was going to find them. I went inside, rolled up the map, and placed it gently beside my coffee mug. Tomorrow I'd track down the name signed in faded pencil on the corner of that page. One word: Hemlock. That name would change everything. When I found out who Hemlock was, and what he left behind, I realized the HOA's whole empire was built on a lie. Don't miss and hit that subscribe button right now. Because the next clue I uncover doesn't just prove ownership. It starts the countdown to their collapse. The next morning, I drove 2 towns over to track down a name that had been haunting me since last night. Hemlock. He was the surveyor who'd drawn my father's original map back in 1956. After a few phone calls and a favor from an old friend at the courthouse, I found his address. But when I pulled up to the small farmhouse on the edge of town, I realized I was about 70 years too late for Hemlock himself. His daughter answered the door, a kind woman in her 70s with sharp blue eyes and the same calm voice Helen used to have. When I explained who I was and showed her the rolled-up survey map, her face softened. "Dad used to talk about that job," she said. "He called it the island that couldn't be claimed." Then she disappeared into the house and came back holding a cardboard box filled with notebooks, dusty, yellowed, and tied with string. She set it on her kitchen table like it was a treasure chest. "These are his field logs," she said. "If the coordinates you're looking for exist anywhere, they'll be in here." I spent the next 2 hours flipping through pages of tight, handwritten notes, measurements, bearings, sketches, until I saw it. A line written in neat cursive. Rains Island boundary pins set at corners ABCD. Iron 3 to 4-inch rebar. Driven 5 feet into granite. There it was. Proof that my father's property had been physically marked in the ground. Not just drawn on paper. Real, measurable, permanent. I thanked her, offered to pay, but she shook her head. "Your dad was a good man," she said. "He made sure my father got home safe from the lake that night. I think this belongs to you." When I walked out with that notebook tucked under my arm, I felt something I hadn't in months: hope. That night, I called an old buddy from the VFW who now ran a private surveying firm. I didn't tell him about the HOA or the fight. I just asked him to run a fresh boundary survey using the original 1956 coordinates, to the centimeter. 2 weeks later, a thick envelope arrived. Inside was a certified survey stamped with a raised seal. The map showed the property lines of Rains Island, and every single one of those 23 cabins sitting perfectly inside them. Not on the border, not near it, inside it. The HOA hadn't just trespassed. They'd built an entire resort on my land. I finally had proof, but I wasn't ready to strike just yet. Because sometimes you don't win by attacking first. You win by letting the enemy finish building their own trap. Don't, and make sure to subscribe so you'll see what happens when I turn their $1 million project into evidence. The day that envelope arrived, everything changed. I had proof, real, physical proof that every nail, beam, and cabin the HOA built was sitting squarely on my land. But proof alone doesn't win a war. Timing does, so I waited. From my porch, I watched them finish what they started. Each morning, trucks rattled over the causeway, hauling lumber and shingles. At night, the glow of floodlights shimmered across the lake like the world's most expensive mistake. To anyone watching, I looked defeated, an old man who'd given up. But inside, I was keeping count. Every board they nailed down, every advertisement they posted online, every dollar they sunk into their own destruction. They thought they had stolen my silence. What they didn't realize was that silence was my weapon. I spent the next few weeks gathering evidence quietly. Every photo, every permit, every sign they put up went into a neat folder labeled Phase 3, Mistake Report. I checked county databases, archived land filings, even environmental permits. That's when I spotted it. The flaw that would tear their whole foundation apart. Their new plat, the one their lawyer had flaunted in front of inspectors months ago. It had never been registered with the state. They'd filed it locally, skipping the final approval required by law. On paper, those 23 cabins didn't exist. That was my opening. I drafted my own filing, a quiet title action. It's a simple legal request that asks a judge to decide, once and for all, who owns a piece of land. No shouting, no grandstanding, just facts, evidence, and signatures. When the court mailed the notice to Maple Shores, I knew exactly what would happen. Karen Hensley, the self-crowned queen of the HOA, would toss it straight in the trash. To her, it would look like another angry letter from a man she'd already crushed. She wouldn't even bother to show up. And that's exactly what I was counting on. While I waited for the court date, the HOA threw themselves a celebration. A ribbon-cutting ceremony. Balloons, cameras, and Karen smiling like she'd invented property. I watched it all from my shore, coffee in hand. The morning sun turning the cabins gold. They thought they'd won. But what they were really doing was hammering the final nail into their own coffin. When Judgment Day finally came, I walked into that courtroom alone, and walked out owning everything they'd built. You won't believe what happened when I revealed the truth in front of the entire community. The morning of the hearing, the lake was still, too still. You could feel it in the air, that quiet before something big. I poured my coffee, tucked the folder of evidence under my arm, and took one last look at the island. 23 luxury cabins. Fresh paint, polished decks, solar panels gleaming in the sun. They called it Maple Shores Resort. I called it Exhibit A. When I walked into the courthouse, I wasn't expecting much. Honestly, part of me thought the judge would take one look at me, a retired old man, and side with the HOA's lawyers before I even opened my mouth. But fate has a funny sense of humor, because Karen Hensley, the HOA president, didn't show up. She sent a representative, some slick, overconfident lawyer in a blue suit who thought this would be over in 10 minutes. He started his argument before I could even sit down. Your Honor, my client's organization has invested millions into the development of Maple Shores. Mr. Raines is simply mistaken about his ownership. The land in question was absorbed under the community's expansion agreement last fiscal year. The judge, an older man with silver glasses and no patience for nonsense, leaned forward. Mr. Raines, do you have proof of ownership? I opened my folder. One by one, I laid it all out on the table. The original survey map, Hemlock's signed field log, and the new certified boundary report stamped with a raised state seal. The lawyer's smile cracked a little. Then I handed over the county's own zoning error, the one showing their expansion plat was never legally registered. The judge scanned it, adjusted his glasses, and exhaled slowly. Mr. Raines, he said, from what I'm seeing here, they built all this on your property. I nodded once. Every last board. The room went silent. The kind of silence that hums. Then the judge spoke again. I'm issuing an immediate injunction. Construction and occupancy on the property are to cease until ownership is settled. Translation? They had to stop everything. The cabins, the rentals, the profits, frozen. And I hadn't even played my full hand yet. Because while the HOA was busy scrambling to cover their mistake, I was already working with someone who could make it all permanent. A real estate attorney who didn't just stop them. He showed me how to take back everything they'd built, legally. That was the day I realized stopping them wasn't enough. I wanted justice, yes, but what came next? That was revenge. The day after the injunction, Maple Shores went quiet. No more hammers, no more saws, no more smug faces waving across the water. Just silence, the kind that tastes like victory. But I wasn't celebrating yet. The HOA had lawyers, money, and connections. And people like Karen Hensley don't back down. They double down. That's when I called in someone I trusted, Marcus Lang, an old Army buddy turned real estate attorney. Smart, calm, and dangerous in a suit. When I handed him the file, he flipped through it once, nodded, and said, "Jack, you're sitting on a goldmine of mistakes. If they built on your land without proper title, that means every single structure they erected belongs to you." I blinked. "Wait, you mean the cabins?" He smiled. "Exactly. They're technically your property now. Fixtures attached to land transfer with the landowner. And that's you." I didn't know whether to laugh or swear. All those luxury cabins, the ones they'd rented out to vacationers, the ones they'd bragged about at ribbon cuttings. Legally, they were mine. Marcus laid out the plan. First, we'd file a quiet title motion to confirm ownership. Then we'd file a compensation claim for unauthorized development, essentially making the HOA pay me for building on my land. It was poetic. They'd used paperwork to steal my island, and now paperwork would steal it right back. The next few weeks were a blur of filings, notarizations, and phone calls. Marcus handled the legal side. I handled the patience. And patience I've got plenty of. Meanwhile, across the lake, the HOA was imploding. Investors pulled out. Tenants demanded refunds. Contractors stopped showing up. Word had spread. The resort was built on stolen land. Karen tried to reach me once, left a voicemail saying, "We can make this right, Mr. Raines. Let's talk settlement." I didn't call back. Because by then it wasn't about money anymore. It was about legacy. Mine, my father's, Helen's. The same dock they destroyed would be rebuilt stronger than before. But this time it wouldn't just overlook an island. It would overlook everything they lost. When the court's final ruling came in, even I couldn't believe it. Not only did I get my island back, but something far bigger I never expected. Don't miss. And hit that subscribe button. Because next time, I'll tell you how the HOA's dream resort became my greatest victory. When the final court ruling arrived, I almost didn't open it. After months of waiting, fighting, and silence, that thick white envelope felt heavier than it looked. But when I finally did, the words were simple and perfect. Judgment in favor of the plaintiff, Jack Raines. I had officially regained full ownership of the island. Every square inch of it. And here's the part that made me laugh out loud. Every single structure the HOA built, every cabin, every luxury deck, every dock, was now legally mine. Marcus called me 5 minutes later. "You just became the proud owner of a multi-million-dollar resort," he said, chuckling. I didn't even know how to respond. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again. Across the lake, the mood was different. The HOA's office went dark. Their website vanished. Word spread fast. Their big Maple Shores resort project had been declared illegal. Investors were suing, members were quitting, and Karen Hensley, she was nowhere to be found. But I wasn't finished yet. You see, winning the island back was justice. But what came next? That was closure. Marcus filed a damages claim on my behalf for emotional distress, property destruction, and illegal development. The number? Over $2 million. and the judge didn't even flinch when he signed it. When the HOA's lawyers tried to appeal, the higher court shut it down. The paperwork was airtight. My survey, Hemlock's notes, the missing registration. Everything lined up perfectly. In the end, the HOA had to liquidate their assets to pay me. They sold off their own headquarters, vehicles, and half their community amenities, all to cover the judgment. And me? I didn't spend a dime of that money on revenge. Instead, I rebuilt the dock, the same way Helen and I had all those years ago. Board by board, plank by plank. This time I carved one word into the final beam before it set. Ours. Now when I sit there in the mornings with my coffee, I can still see the cabins across the shore. They stand empty, silent. Monuments to arrogance and to patience. Funny thing is, people ask if I ever think about selling the island now that it's worth millions. I tell them the same thing every time. You can't sell peace. You build it. And that's how I turn the HOA's greed into my greatest victory. If you think justice always finds its way, no matter how long it takes, hit that subscribe button and stay tuned. Because here on Tomato Tales, we've got plenty more stories where karma hits back even harder. It's been 3 years since the dust settled. The court battles are over. The island is quiet again, the way it was always meant to be. When the sun rises now, it hits the water just right. The lake glows like liquid gold, and the new dock, the one I rebuilt, creaks softly in rhythm with the waves. Sometimes I sit there with my coffee and think about everything that happened. The noise, the arrogance, the laughter when they called me a trespasser on my own land. They thought they could erase me. Instead, I erased them. The HOA no longer exists. Their website, their office, their fancy board meetings, gone. All that's left is a stack of court records and 23 empty cabins that now belong to me. I don't rent them out. I don't sell them. I keep them standing as a reminder, a monument to what happens when greed meets patience. Every now and then, people from town stop by. Fishermen, hikers, old friends. They ask, Jack, why not turn it into a resort again? Make some money off it. I just smile. Because they don't understand. This place isn't about money. It's about legacy. I walk those cabins sometimes, running my hand along the walls they built with stolen confidence. They're solid, perfect even. And that's what makes it beautiful. They built it thinking they were taking from me, but all they really did was build for me. Helen would have loved that. I can almost hear her laugh when I think about it. She always said, Jack, you can't stop people from being greedy, but you can stop them from winning. And she was right. One cabin I turned into a small workshop. Inside, on the wall above my workbench, hangs a framed copy of the judge's final ruling. Right next to the old 1956 survey map. The map that started it all. The map my father and I once held under the same sky that now reflects off this quiet water. Peace isn't loud. It doesn't roar like engines or echo like hammers. It whispers, and if you listen closely, it sounds a lot like justice. And that's how I turned their greed into my peace, and my family's legacy into something untouchable. If you believe patience is the sharpest weapon of all, hit that subscribe button, drop a comment for Helen, and stick around, because here on Tomato Tales, every story reminds you karma never misses.